do a review of Likutei Sichas in Chelek Tezayin, volume 16, and the fourth Sicha of the Parshas Mishpatim. The Rebbe explains a halacha that we learn out from the pasuk in this parsha, namely the law of moide b'mitzvahs, that one who admits partially to the demand of the other who demands, and he admits partially, then there is a din of a chiyuv shvua. The Rebbe also brings down a special halacha that we learn from the pasuk, in which the Shach brings down and explains, and the Rebbe will explain this more fully to be understood. B'pnimis inyonim, that we have the Yetzer Hara who demands, and we admit partially that we're guilty, and how the Shavua helps us. Very interestingly, how the counterpart of this halacha and how it fits more beautifully into the explanation of the Shach in this halacha. Let's look inside. Aleph. From Pasuk, mi bal dvorim yigash aleihim. So the pasuk says, who has a complaint, he's a bal dvorim, he has an argument, should come to the court, should go to them to the judgment. So let him talk the Gemara. So the Gemara learns from these words, as ein niskokin ela l'tevea techila, to whom we approach first, who do we listen to first, who do we pay attention first? It's to the one who is demanding, the Baal Devarim, the one who has the issue, the one who brings the litigation, the one who has the complaint. So we first listen to the complaint. Der Baal Devarim Tevea, the one who has the issue, the one who is demanding, the litigant, Yagish Dvorav Alehem, he is the one that should bring the complaint to them, and that would be the one. So, is Mefarish der Shach? So the Shach explains, as dos meint vi pashtus haloshen, that this means, as the simple understanding of the language, as beres din hert ois frier, the tainus von teveya, that first Bezdin listens to the argument of the one who is demanding, the plaintiff, und nochdem the reit von nidva, and then Bezdin listens to the words of the defendant. So what difference does it make who you listen to first? Whose arguments you hear first is in fall for Nameida b'mitzvahs. That would be in a case where the defendant agrees partially to the argument of the litigant. Over there, the difference makes who we listen to first, because the obligation of the defendant having to swear is in the situation where the plaintiff demanded, and then you, the defendant, admitted. But if the defendant comes forth and he says that he owes partially, then there would be no requirement of shua. Let's look inside. Der din is, the halacha is, as when heis der nitva amoide b'mitzvahs. When do we call the defendant that he is admitting partially, and then he would be guilty or liable to swear the Torah's shavua, nor demult then Zain Hido, that will only be in a case when his admission, the mitzvahs that he's admitting, partially kumt noch them, that comes after the der teveya, then the plaintiff had by him gemond dem ganzen schum, that he demanded the entire amount. So if the plaintiff demanded 1,000, that the owes him 1,000, and the defendant says, I owe you 500. So then the defendant has to swear from the Torah that he only owes him 500 and he doesn't owe him. If the defendant admits that he owes him only 500, he would have to swear that he owes him 500 and no more. But in this case, he says 500 is 50. If the defendant admitted up front, he says, I owe the plaintiff, I owe him 50. And then the plaintiff demanding, he says, you owe me 100. He is not admitting partially because admission came before the demand. When he's part of an ashvu de'iraisa, then he's exempt from ashvu of the Torah. So it makes a difference. That's why we have to listen first to the words of the plaintiff so that the defendant can be liable for that shvuah. Their time for their halacha is, what is the reason? Why are we wanting that he should swear that to make it less easier for the defendant, and we want that the plaintiff should have the demand first so that the other person will be liable to shvuah? What's the reason halacha is? The nitva had gedarft abzahlen the mitzvahs, because the defendant should have paid that 50, the partial was that is made that he admits before they had brought the demand, before the plaintiff brought him to court, to the court. Since he didn't do what he should have done, is on his own paid the 50 up front, not having to wait that Beis Din should come and collect it from him. Und es geblieben an Nitva be Beis Din, and he remained somebody who is a defendant in Beis Din, is therefore niskokin l'dvei tchila. That's why we will listen to the plaintiff first, bichdei soll sein mechuyev, so the defendant shall be liable. Ashvu deraisa, he'll have to swear to that fact and not get away without a shvu. But there's an exception. Weiter sagt die Gemara. The Gemara gives a further statement that pa'omim shenizkokim the nitva tchila, that sometimes we are actually going to listen to the defendant first, so he'll be exempt from a shvu. And what would be the case? In a case where the assets of the defendant were cheap, he couldn't get the full price for his assets, so the reason that he didn't pay was because he didn't want to lose the money, so he didn't pay yet. He had a good reason for not paying yet. He's the Shach Mevayer. So the Shach explains behemshech to sein Pirush in his Kokin L'Tavei Tchila as a follow-up to his explanation when we do go to the plaintiff first. That if the reason why the defendant had not paid the mitzvahs, that part that he had missed beforehand, and is not violated as gewollt verhalten, it's not because he wanted to delay, hold on to the other one's money without paying it, Nor valinyanim zman, but during that time, seine den Chosim given zili, his assets were cheap, billig. They were cheap. Either they were not valued and he couldn't get the full price, or because of his push to sell it now, so people won't give him the full price. Oder das Gufa was will say verkaufen beim Hiris. This itself, that he's trying to sell it quickly, in order to pay, would make them cheap. Then we will not go first. Then we will go first to the defendant, because it's not at fault. So maybe that way he'll get away from having to swear, because the fact that you brought him to Beis Din was because he didn't pay yet, because he didn't want to lose money, because he couldn't sell, he couldn't get the price for his assets and pay up. So that's an acceptable excuse. And therefore, we're going to allow him to agree to the first, and he won't have to swear. The Rebbe is going to explain this whole idea on the spiritual level in the service of Hashem. Base. We get in Filmol, as we had spoken many times, seinen alle inyonim enigla de Torah faran euchen avodah ruchnis. All aspects in the revealed part of Torah, they also exist in the spiritual service. Ba'adrabah, on the contrary, not only do they exist, but they actually come first in the spiritual and then to the halachic, the physical. Since the Torah originally was, in the beginning, was a hidden treasure, above, and from there it journeyed and it descended until it dressed up in worldly matters of this world. So that means that the inyonim these matters, as they are in the spiritual and in the inner, seinen der mocker, they are the root, the source, from which they are evolved into the revealed. And furthermore, there is many matters of the revealed part of Torah, you can only fully understand them only through explaining them in the spiritual matters. In the physical matter, in this case, it's not so clear, this idea, but in the spiritual matter, it'll be clear. It's not so clear because the case of Moedem and Mitzvahs is just one scenario, but we say we always go to the plaintiff first. But what would be the purpose of going to the plaintiff first when it's not a case of Moedem and Mitzvahs? So in the spiritual matters, we'll understand it. Valderach says binyonim. Similar in our case, it's not so clear in the literal, in the simple, in the nigla of it, it's not so clear. The pashtus is that Pirush from Shach nit in ganzem glatt. Simply, this interpretation of the Shach is not entirely smooth. For Noshen Razal, and in the language of our sages' blessed memory, that is kokin, that we would first go to the plaintiff, and it says not only to a plaintiff that is demanding and there's a partial payment agreement from the other one, but it says in all cases, teveya stam. And we're saying about any teveya, all the time we go first to the plaintiff. Is mashma, it appears, ados is an inyan kloli, that this is a general idea. Was is anaf kimina lepoil that would make a difference in actuality. In many situations, differences when in demands, but Pirush Hashach kommt aus, but according to the interpretation of the Sifsekoyen of the Shach, it turns out as the Nafkemina Lepoyel that what different practically is there, whether we go to the plaintiff or to the defendant first, is not in the Msuk Tfiyah. This is only in the category of demand, was the Nitveis Amedim Mitzvahs, in which the one who is being demanded, that the defendant is admitting partially, and there it makes a difference whether it will be Chai V'Shvur or not. However, the Rebbe says, Leuten bir pnimi in the Maimer is a sober verstandig. According to the inner explanation of this statement of the Gemara, it is understood. But when we talk about in the spiritual service, is rubam kikulam fun teveya v'nitva. In the majority, almost all of the cases when there is a plaintiff and there is a defendant, it's always connected with Meidem Mixes. There's always a Meidem Mixes. The Rebbe will explain the demander is the Yetzer Hara. And a Yid admits to the Yetzer Hara only partially. Gimel, der Teveya von Ayid, the plaintiff, the demander from a Jew, is the Yetzer Hara. That's the Yetzer Hara. Why? What he does was früher bringt ihm soll durchfallen nach Rachmana litzlan. First, he brings the person that he should fail in a sin, God forbid, or that akoponim, or minimally, even if he doesn't cause him to violate a very clear sin, to amatzav, he brings him to a situation from chet meloshon chisorin, chet that comes from the language of lacking. He brings him to a situation that he's lacking. And after he causes him to fail, he's teveya, then he demands. Since he stumbled, he caused the Jew to stumble. So this Jew should be given over to the domain of the Yetzer Hara. So about this demand of the Yetzer Hara is a Yid, then the Yid, the Nitva, who's the defendant, nor made the b'miktzas. He only admits partially. Let it be true that he failed, God forbid, in a sin. But hakoil, but all of it, he's not totally, all of him is not invested, he is not fully invested in the sin. Not with his entire essence, God forbid, is he involved in the sin. Sein etzem haneshama is bechlal hecher from chet. His essence of his soul is in general above, higher than sin. Even during the time of sin, it was still faithful with Hashem. Nochmer, the essence of the soul is always faithful with Hashem. Nochmer, even from the perspective of the powers of the person, which is not only the essence of his soul, but even the powers of his soul. Every Jew has good within himself. Not only do they have stam good, we say afilu Pesha Yisrael, even sinners amongst the Jews, Malay mitzvahs kediman are full with mitzvahs as a pomegranate is full with seeds. Was there emeser musak for Malayin, they're full. Is the pshutai, it is literally when he's full, says einen ganzen full with mitzvahs. They are entirely full with mitzvahs. Das heißt, which really means, as wegen was faraid soll sich nor reden. Whatever Jew we're talking about, even to the lowest of Pesha Yisrael, is by him nit shaykh the mitzvahs from the ganzen rachas v'shalom. So by him, it doesn't fit. It doesn't apply the fact that he should be totally bad, because there's always a lot of good over there. Und der Inyan, as alle Darges von Eden, and this idea that all levels of Jews, Sayat Tzaddik, whether you are a Tzaddik, and was ein Tzaddik ba'oretz asher yaseh tov v'lo, there is really no such a thing as a Tzaddik that only does good and doesn't sin, or lo doesn't fail, doesn't miss out. Listen. So if you talk about a Tzaddik or a Saya Rosha, was oich poishi Yisrael, and even if they're sinners amongst Israel, they're still filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Zainen in their bechina for mitzvah. So everybody, because the tzaddik fails a little bit, the Rasha is full with mitzvahs. Nobody's totally bad. Nobody's totally good. There's a partial. There's is merumas in posuk from Vanent melernt up them din from mitzvah. So this idea that there is always a Maida B'miktzas, there's always partially good, there's not a full admission, is learn it up from the mitzvah, we learn it up from the pasuk, Kol Dvar Pesha Asher Yemar Ki Huzeh. So the pasuk, Kol Dvar Pesha Goymer Asher Yemar Ki Huzeh, that he says, this is it. And we will see this is the Moed B'miktzas, and this fits in very well on these different levels of admitting. Leuten Oisteich from Posik and Aveda Ruchnis. A way we translate this verse in the spiritual service is the Teviyah. So then the demand is Sai al Kol Dvar Pesha. This is even if it's a matter of negligent guilt. Ben einer is pesheya umayel rachmana litzlan in zayin shlichus in elam hazeh. When one is negligent and violates, God forbid, his mission in this world, that is a case of pesha. Unsai al kol aveda, or whether it's a lost object. Then sees nor in an oifen von aveda v'chisoron. It's only in a way. It's not negligent. It's lost. It's lacking. So in these extremes, der tut nicht wieviel wollt gekent öfter in sein Schliches. He does not accomplish to the extent of which he would be able to accomplish in his Schliches. And because he doesn't do it fully, wird verloren rachmona litzlan, a tale from the koiches von nefesh elikis. So God forbid, a part of the powers of the godly soul are lost, for he didn't utilize them fully. And then the pasuk, so that's the dvar pesha and al kol aveda. But then the Torah enumerates 4 more details. When the fir pratim al shoir, the ox, al chamoir of the donkey, al seh, the sheep, al salmo, or the garment, and the fir sugim in nefesh habahamis, they are the 4 categories of the animal soul. Was their firin, they lead to kol dvar pesha aveda. They are the ones that cause the nefesh habahamis in the various different shapes and form of sher, chamer, and salma that bring the person to either be negligent and violate his mission, or to be a loss by not fully doing. It's oiv the tviyas. Al kol dvar pesha al kol aveda. So then when you have the demand for either the negligent or the loss, entver tayid. So the Jew responds, which is asher yomar. What does he say? Ki hu zeh. He says, Ki hu zeh means that's it. As vos menzol by imonen, what you're saying is as nor zeh. their mitzvahs. He's saying this is it, only the partially. It is not a made of mitzvahs canal. That means that the Yid responds to the demands of the Yetzer Hara that he's only admitting partially. So what happens when a person is made of mitzvahs? Spiritually, you bring a shavua, that's the halacha. And in this case, it means that you give him a shvua, you give him a satisfaction, lahazbia, to extra energy. Dalet. The psagdim from Torah is, the ruling of the Torah is, as a moide b'miktzas is chayv shvua, that if you admit partially, then you are liable to make a shvua. Dafke durch dem shvua, it's only when you swear through this shvua, then we believe him about the part that he is not admitting. What does this mean spiritually? What does it mean in the spiritual service? Since he failed partially, he entered into the domain, into the possession of the Yetzer. Then he needs additional strength to protect himself. As Omer Nitarai fallen the Rishusa, he should no longer fall into the domain of the Yetzer. Not, he doesn't make sure that you will not admit. A person who confesses and a person who neglects will be compassionate. Hashem will love. So you have to make sure you don't fall into his possession anymore by confessing, by letting go. And then you will be. So you need that extra. And that's why they give him a shvuah from Loshen Soiva, shvuah from Loshen satisfaction. You satisfy him with additional and higher powers, as in zweiter Teil soll bleiben in Rishus HaKedusha, so that the other part, which is not in the Rishus of the Klippa, should remain in the Rishus HaKedusha. This is Aber Yedua. However, we know the severity, the idea of a shvua, how serious it is. By nemen of zich, a shvua, if you accept a shvua upon yourself, you are setting yourself, putting yourself on the line. If you do not utilize properly the additional powers, is need blows was by him felt. Those was a darf zukommen. So then not only will you be lacking the additions that you need to add, nor as kommt ihm noch an einisch, but then you get a punishment. Was euch gave him so that also his higher powers are getting lost as well. So if you take a shavua and then you don't do it, then it's even worse, because you're taking this masbiyah, the shvua, and you're not even coming through with these higher powers, and you're wasting your higher powers. This is their time for was Chazal seine stark mazir. This is the reason why our sages of blessed memory are very strongly warning gegen geben a shvua. They're against to give a oath. Dort we can uskommen on them, there where you can get around without the shvua. Even if you swear truthfully, we also don't like to get. If you get away without a shvua, we'll do that. The far is the Gemara mamshich. That's why the Gemara continues. As es is varan the eitze that we have this idea. Unfall we say that there is a case and there is an order for niskoking the nitva techila, in which you would first start with the defendant first. Was durch them, through this, wird man Potter von dem Eufen Havide, was fordert das Schwur. That way we get rid, you free yourself from the style of service that requires a Schwur. Und das ist, wenn man teinet kozili nichse, when the argument is that my assets are cheap. Rabbi explains. So, what does it mean? Hey, that man das verstehen, behagdim the biur in dem Sipura Gemara. Have to first give the explanation about the story of the Gemara that Rabbi Chaim Zakkai, who said he doesn't know which direction he's being led by before he passed away. Why didn't he know? Why did he wait to the time of his passing? So Rabbi Chaim Zakkai, the Gemara relates. We have to explain the story that the Gemara says about Rabbi Chaim Zakkai. Was hat geweint for sein Petire. He was crying before his passing. Und hat gesagt. And when they asked him, why is he crying? So he said, as the Sibba von sein Bechir, the reason for crying is those was yesh lefonai shnei drachim. In front of me, there are two roads. Achas shel Gan Eden, v'achas shel Gehinnom. One of them leads to the heavens, and one of them leads to Gehinnom. I don't know which path they're going to lead me. So I shouldn't cry. Bit me in a question mark rhetorically. How could I not cry when I don't know where I'm going to? Is you do the kasha, so the question is known. How come as Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said he's given from the Gedol HaTanoim. He was from the great Tanoim. Und wie Chazal seinen bekam, as our station lesson memory in many areas. Maflig in der Gadlus for Rabbi Chaim ben Zakkai, they praise the greatness of Rabbi Chaim ben Zakkai. Und ist doch gewiss gewesen, dieser Betachlis in Sulmiravasitay. So for sure, he was totally careful in staying away from doing bad and doing good. So how comes, or by Zaina Sofik, Sergating Gan Eden or Gehenim, so he is not sure whether he's going to Gan Eden or Gehenim. How could he have such a doubt? Further, we need to understand why did it so take him? He was crying, specifically close to his passing. So why that? Hey, Nemes, yes, it's true that that these two roads, the one that leads to Gan Eden, the one that leads to Gehenim, that they are tied to the reward and the punishment of the soul after it passes from the world. So that's why it's important after passing the world. As is aber schwer zu verstehen, but it's still difficult to understand. See, it's poshut that it is obvious that those was as hotim beiker ge'art. That what was the mainly that bothered Rabbi Chaim ben Zakkai them any idea chulu? I don't know. Isn't it benegeya them inyan from schar ve'inish fazich? It's not just as it connects to the idea: is he going to get paid? Is he going to get punished in of himself? Nor b'shayches to matzove madregos. It really was bothered. Where is he standing? What's his level? Is he going to Gan Eden, going to Gehenna? See, whether he is in a situation from the Royal Gan Eden Kedusha that he is fit for Gan Eden Kedusha, or the Chazal Shalom Lehepach, or maybe the opposite. So that's his main concern. That's something which is to be concerned all during all of his lifetime. Es ist doch azach was bedarf sich der Reuk mit Steirswan. This is something that one should be in pain. As long as there's a doubt. Nit nor this is not only at the time of the passing. Nor b'meshach from ganzen Leben. This should be something during his entire life. Both. Einer for the Yorim in them. One of the explanations. Why was it only during the time of his passing that it started worrying him that he started to cry? To every Jew was given a shlichus, a mission, a tafkit, and a job was that he has to fulfill in the duration of his lifetime in this world. Und zu kennen, and for the person to be able to accomplish this mission, he was given the netiket solteg, the needed amount of days, and the set powers, which are important to kennen, in order to be able to accomplish this mission properly. Nit mer, he wasn't given more time and powers, and nit weniger, not less time and powers. Shas a'id nutz nit ois atog. When a Jew does not utilize, whether it's a day, a shah, an hour, or even a second, in order to fulfill his mission, is thus nit nor achison. It's not only that he is missing, but that is lacking, that is nit misale geworden, that he has not been elevated, to the extent that he was able to and he should have. Nor yet der rega was tut nit in sein shlichus, but rather every instant and instant, every second and second that he's not doing his mission, what he's supposed to do, even if he's doing something good, but he's not focused and not doing his job. Maybe good, but it's not something which relates to his mission. Felt by in the rega b'milu shlichusay, then he is missing that instant, that second in fulfilling his shlichus. Besides that, is missing is a mishane. He changes, which means moyel chaz v'sholem. He violates, God forbid, b'shlichusay shel melech malcham kodesh baruch hu, in the mission of the King of Kings, the King, that King's King, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is jeder Rega gewesen in ganzem vernommen und reingetan in sein Avoide B'Shlichus. Every instant he was totally preoccupied and invested in his service and his mission. Limud HaTorah, the study of Torah, Kiyum HaMitzvahs, observance of mitzvahs. Is given reingetan mit his askus. He was so invested, put in it with such a preoccupation in to fulfill, accomplish his mission properly in this world. As he didn't have the time to stop and to reflect. Was tut sich mit him? What's happening? What's his standing? Was is sein Matze Bechlal? What is his own situation generally? How could he stop and start thinking about himself, about his levels, that he needs that time that it takes him to think about himself? He must utilize it. He must utilize it to fulfill his mission. Specifically when it was close to his passing. When he was about to end his mission in this world, that is when it stopped, to make this true, just accounting, because it was already, now was the last time. That's why he didn't know. Not now, then when? And that is that brought about by him the crime. Zion. This style, this type in fulfilling one's mission, as betracht nit wegen sich, that you don't think about yourself, nor blois wegen der shlichus, you're just thinking about your mission, is an inyan ikri v'kloli in avodas Hashem. That's a main aspect and a general aspect in the service of Hashem. Was vert gimon from yeder eden, that is demanded from every Jew. Yesh loymar, And we can say this also is hinted and emphasized in del halon, in the inner contents of the verses that brought down in the Heintiker Parsha, in today's portion. Noch die Wörter, after the words, Vavadetem es Hashem Elekechem Goimer, you shall serve God, your God, etc. Was der mit, werd gemeint close in your Avodah. What is it meant with this? The general service. Side the Avodah for Abba, whether we're talking about the service of loving Hashem, the less pulchana kepulchana dirichim, so there's no such a great service, a service as the service of Av Richimuso. That's one part of the Avodah. And the other part, side the Avodah from here, also the service of fear, Avodas Eved, which is the fear of Hashem, to serve Hashem as a slave doing the work of the master, is the Posik Mamshich. The Posik continues, Leitia Mishakela Va'akora Ba'artzecha Es Mispar Yemecha Amalek. There shall not be a woman miscarrying or a barren woman not having children in your land. I will fulfill your days. What does it mean? Shakela va'akora. What does it mean? A woman losing her children, or a woman that is an akara can't have children. In avodah ruchnis meint, what does it mean in the spiritual service? As the avodah from avaviyirachulu, that the love, the service of avaviyirav avadatem is Hashem Elokeichem, is a mishakela va'akora hadit kenkim betulus. Doesn't have sustained, loses it, or akora doesn't have any children. And the sibah of the is mishakil v'akora is be'artzecha, because it's in your land. Be'artzecha means from lashon ratzon. The reason is when there is a satisfaction. Shas ha'id hot an egen ratzon. When a Jew has his own desire, Asvi is ratzon from zayin avoy, he's satisfied from his service. Was those weist as it is madkish zayin mitzvahs. This points to the fact that he feels his existence. Is Oved Hashem. He is the one that's serving Hashem. Hot Avav. He is the one. It's an entity. He feels himself that he is the one that loves and fears Hashem. It's ba'artzecha. It becomes your rotzen. Those can goyim zayin. It's your rotzen. This can cause This can cause you should fail. Das heißt, means free. First, the service starts with a measured and a limited way. Nor a viful only to the extent that he is satisfied from his service. And eventually, after this, bringt as derzu, it brings to the person as a machta chilik, starts making a distinction between one service and another service. The avodah in welcher hot achush is a great suton. That work that he has a feeling from, he has a feeling for that, is he's willing to do it, he enjoys that. But another type of category, no. He has a talent, in which case he's talented, he will do that, but not other way. Until he falls from his thing. Is the eitzes, how do you deal with it? As leitia goimer should not be a mishakela va'akora ba'artzecha as mispar yomecha amali. You fill the numbers of your day. Shas erizich mizbein. When he reflects as yomim yutzoru, that days were created. As is im bashtim givor, that for him it was set up. A mispar misuyem from tag, a specific number of days. In welchem darf ausführen sein schliches ba'almadein, in which he needs to accomplish his mission in this world. Every instant that he uses for something different, something else, so he changes and he causes a violation in the shlichus from Melech Malcham Lochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the mission of the King of King HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This gives him a shake. Verliert dem Hergesh von seinem Metzias, and he loses that feeling, that sense from his being. He becomes so invested, put in with his entire being in fulfilling his mission. He doesn't even sense as is der mamale, that you are the one that is fulfilling for the Meibesh Shlichus. It's not him fulfilling Hashem's shlichus. As herzich by him, nor the shlichus guf. All that he senses by him is that there is a mission here. That's it. On the contrary, Shas man proved him the monen. When you try to remind him about Yurotzen, wegen sein matzav ruchni, about his spiritual standing, and verter mit Zerbrochenkeit, then he answers with a broken heart. Vos mi rotzin, or the tainu, what does it matter to me what I want or what I have pleasure, the pleasure? There are days that are created. Darf men stehen al hamishmar, so you must stand on guard. As kein ein rega soll nicht verloren werden, that not even 1 second should get lost. We can't be thinking about levels, which step you are. Shas a'id poil by zich. When a yid can infect by himself, the devotion, the subjugation, with the whole of his essence, to the Meibesh, to Hashem, and his mission. So then it's fulfilled as mispar yomechamali. Then it becomes a promise. I will fulfill your days. Even if there were days in which he did not do his mission, or that even he has done matters that are opposite of his mission, God forbid, is as mispar Yamecha Amale. I will fill. But it doesn't say who is going to fill it, because it goes on the highest levels of the Atzmusayus, Baruch. It's the essence and is Hashem blessed, was his Hecher von jeden Shem, which is beyond and higher of every name. From them as and there cannot touch any blemish. Is Maftiach, he promises. As vet memale sein, umashlim sein, that he will fulfill and complete the verfehlte Tag, those days that were missing, und alle seine Tag will sein ganz beschleimus, and all of his days will be wholesome and complete. Das ist euch der Biur Pnimi in der Halacha. This is also the inner explanation in the law. As in a fall from kozili nichsi, when the assets are cheap, is man potter from the shvuah the made of mitzvahs, you're exempt of the shvuah of the made of mitzvahs. The yorun und koiches what the ebishter gita iden, the years and the powers that Hashem gives to a Jew, durchzuführen sein shlichus ba'al modein, for him to accomplish his mission in this world. Those seinen the nechosim von Aiden, those are the assets of a Jew. Is b'shas Aid poiled by zich dan bittel betachlis, when a Jew can effect by himself to have this total subjugation. As ein ganzer Metzias, that is his entire being, is not was is a shaliach from Eberstein, that he is, all what he is just a shaliach, an agent from Hashem. Sein ganze Zeit und alle koiches, his entire time, and all of his energies, his power, strength, deinem Vernumen, biton dem Eberstein Shlichus, is with doing the mission of Hashem, lasisli is to make for Hashem a dwelling place in this world below, Hotter b'melek in so he doesn't have any time to gain Eifadin Torah mit Yetzer Hara, to go for a court case with the Yetzer Hara. Because if he's going to take that time and the powers to utilize it, to argument, to fight it out with the Yetzer Hara, then the assets, the time, and the energies have become cheap. There's man and koiches was the Eberstart him gegeben, the time and the powers that Hashem gave him. They'll become cheap. Nicht ausgenutzt. They'll not be utilized for the most precious things. Therefore, that's why nimmt man on sein Teine. That's why we accept his argument when that is potter von Ashvua. He doesn't need, he's exempt from Ashvua, but nicht nor is man sicher. Not only are you sure that he won't fall into the domain of the Yetzer, God forbid, but Adarabah, but on the contrary, as Vetzain, as Mispar Yamecha Amali, Hashem will fulfill all the other days, even the ones that were missing. As Oich Dos was a freer verfelt, even that which has before missed out, that the Smalver and Beshlemus will be fulfilled completely. This is Meseches Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim, Tovshin Tezvov, and Dibra Hamaschil Etia Mashakelo, and the Maimer in Tovshin Yud Beis.